We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson, and I'm here today with...
I'm the star today.
Oh man, Brandon's the star today. Yes, so Brandon's going to be on here as guest. I'm going to be on here as interviewer. And did you know that we have a celebrity in our mix? Did you know that we have a guy who did the Ninja Warrior, went through the whole frickin' process? Look at that. I just stopped myself from swearing. Went through the whole huge process of auditioning, of training, of working his butt off, of putting himself out there and going through that in Australia for the very first, when the Ninja Warrior came to Australia for the first time. Brandon, what happened?
You say celebrity. I mean, I wouldn't even make it to say like the real world. Or like any of those B list. I wouldn't even qualify for that. But what happened was I ended up with the single greatest possible fun fact I could ever ask for the rest of my life. Anytime getting to know a group of people. What's a fun fact about you? Well, I hold the world record for the fastest elimination in Ninja Warrior history.
So you all know Brandon because Brandon's brilliant and Brandon's a fabulous interviewer. And if you've listened to Brandon, you've heard a little bit about this, but Brandon is also a competitive athlete, a super accomplished competitive athlete in gymnastics. And it was also a cover boy in a magazine back in Australia as well. You know, the swimsuit model thing? Brandon did that whole swimsuit model thing.
I went from rad bod to dad bod.
I doubt that that's true. So this is another aspect. So Brandon, what does it feel like to be the fastest elimination ever in a Ninja Warrior? How does it feel to fail?
Oh, so the fun thing about it now is it's fun. It's fun to hold that. I would much rather have that be the case than be the middle tier performer, right? Even if to make it to the second or third stage, it's always been fun to have that as a little bit of a self-deprecating story to tell. Because, you know, in the moment when I went splash, it was devastating. It was devastating until I made it back to my tent and was able to put pen to paper to be like, what's the meaning of this? Fortunately, having done the new warrior training only, a year before, I'd already started to begin to really look at the man in the mirror and challenge a lot of stories and attitudes and beliefs. And what I wrote down in that journal became an article that I posted in 2017, which did the rounds, especially, I know our local news picked it up, and some of my fellow competitors shared it around. So it did some rounds, and every now and then it resurfaces. Like in the new company I'm working with, many of the clients we have been stalking my LinkedIn and they've been bringing it to the surface. So I just thought this would be a fun conversation because these 5 lessons I took away from it have been huge in my life. And sometimes I forget them, but for the most part, they've become rooted in how I approach any challenge or opportunity, and lessons that I honestly, truly believe that I had a grasp of these beforehand. There would have been a different outcome on the stage in front of millions of Australians watching.
There we go. So here's what we're offering to you, the listener, today is 5 lessons learned from failure. And if you put these lessons to work now, you might get what Brandon just said just now about setting yourself up for success. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with 1?
Let's start with 1. So think of this as giving you the gift of going second.
There you go.
learn from my mistakes here. This is the opportunity. So the lesson one that came out was, when taking on an exciting new adventure, leave your ego at home. Now, interestingly, at that point, having just entered into the world of men's work, the conversations of ego come up a lot in our spaces, and really starting to identify, are these my true beliefs? Are these my true attitudes? Or are these a construct that I consciously or unconsciously have running in the background that's making me behave a certain way to, in essence, my understanding of ego is it tries to maintain a status quo of my identity, my self-worth, how important I think I am. And so going into Ninja Warrior, a client of mine, actually, I owned a gym at the time, a client of mine worked for the local news and said, hey, they're opening things for this. And I thought, oh, it's a throwaway. I'll put my name in, but nothing will happen. Well, I submit my video, I get accepted, and I start I do the fitness test. Now, at the time, I was in quite good shape. And the fitness test was things like hanging for X amount of time. Well, I'm an ex-gymnast, so that was quite easy. It was burpees. It was all the stuff. Did really well, murdered myself in the process, but clearly on the day I was the top performer. Then out of 7,000 people that applied, 250 got selected. I happened to be one of those 250. And it's interesting, the people that work for these TV shows, the interviewers that kind of get your life story, they want to see what they're going to promote. They're masters at making you feel special. Like, do you ever wonder, how does someone go on to The Bachelor or whatever and behave the way they do? And it's because they're surrounded by professionals who are able to bring out and amplify that aspect of your personality. And so here I am, gregarious, charismatic, super confident, ex-Australian gymnast who's just crushed this fitness test. And they're going, oh, you're amazing. Oh, yes, you're going to crush it. We're going to have cameras on you 24/7. And that was the experience when I went to Ninja Island, which was actually Cockatoo Island, nestled in the center of Sydney Harbour. I mean, just stunning. It was so cool. Yeah. It was so surreal. When I was there and I have these cameras following me everywhere, like, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. I was feeling kind of special. And so one thing that I was starting to kind of fracture in my awareness was that I had valid reasons to be confident.
Yes.
Based on my performance, based on my background. But what I've learned in retrospect is there's a really fine line between arrogance and confidence. And I think therein lies where that line exists. If I'm unable to distinguish confidence that is earned from arrogance that is inflated from the ego, dangerous things can happen. Decisions without a lot of data or logic can rise to the surface. And so what I could have done, and I guess the lesson here for leaving the ego at home is, rather than let the environment amplify my natural character, my natural strengths, my natural confidence, instead I let my ego run roughshod. And yeah, I was not grounded whatsoever. I felt very special.
You felt very special. Well, okay, cool. Yes, you are very special. And I just want to say that what I hear also is, embedded in the failure, you were 250 out of 7,000. So there's something for listeners, right? All of my failures that you've had, all of your failures that you've had, what is the success that failure is already embedded in?
Well, yeah. So the environment becomes inherently more challenging because you look at, all right, so maybe we're a select few out of X amount that applied. So yeah, there's and that's what my mum was the first thing my mum said when I called her after failing. She was like, oh, but at least, you're 250 out of 7,000. And I was not prepared to hear that in the moment. Yeah. And I'm also number 250 out of 250.
There you go.
Yeah.
So lesson 2, and you've kind of already said this, right, about throwing yourself ahead, getting ahead of yourself in the game. Do not underestimate the challenge in front of you. So how'd that play out in this?
So you've seen the scene is set, right? Yeah, surrounded by cameras. I'm getting twice as much interview time as most of my other competitors. Some of my other competitors are being like, oh, wow, you had to do really well in the fitness test. Just heads just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so interestingly, a lot of people will watch Ninja Warrior or even the Olympics. It's funny how everyone becomes an armchair expert watching these things. Totally. So I've sat with people watching the Ninja Warrior and they're like, oh, I would have done that and I would have done that. And why don't you grab this? And what they don't know, what you don't know if you've ever been an armchair expert, is there are certain rules that they don't make clear to the audience. Like, you can't grab that pole. You're not allowed to step on that. So we have restrictions. What a lot of armchair experts also don't know is that we are not allowed to practice at all. We see the course once. And what they do is they get a stuntman or they get former competitors to run through the course to show you how it works.
Yeah.
And don't touch this, don't do that. So we know what we're supposed to be doing. So we're sitting there in this group of people, this stunt person's running through, who happened to be a friend of mine, which was kind of cool, which distracted me even more. And all the while I'm thinking, easy, 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 bunny slope, bunny slope, bunny slope. I'm worried about the second course. I'm worried about the third course. I'm thinking about climbing the rope of Mount Midoriyama.
Wow.
I'm not even looking at the course that's right in front of me. So I immediately thought, this is a shoe-in. I'm going to crush this. And so what I ended up doing was underestimating the challenge ahead. And there was no humility in it at all. All right. Or even preparation, rather than, because when I was a gymnast, I would lay in bed at night before a competition, memorizing every single move.
Yeah.
The feeling of my feet hitting the ground after sticking a landing, like visualization was so important. After that run through, I couldn't even have told you what comes after the first thing. Right. I couldn't have even told you how many steps there were, which is kind of ironic because I only made it to the second. So therein lies another seed of that had been sown for my eventual failure, was that, I was totally underestimating the challenge in front of me. I thought it was going to be a cakewalk. It was the opposite.
So for somebody who's starting out on something out there, like, so what's the prep? So there's the thing. Don't underestimate the course in front of you. So do this instead.
Mm-hmm. And which leads to lesson 3, which is respect the course.
Yeah.
Regardless of how simple it looks, respect what's right in front of you, because there are potential pitfalls everywhere throughout any challenge. Where I also have experienced this in my life and where this lesson's taken a long time to learn is I interview very well. I am very good at interviews. I learned early on that when interviewing for a job or a position or a contract, I need to position myself as the absolute solution to every problem this role is looking to solve. And I have oftentimes oversold myself and ended up in positions where I was not prepared, right? Or I thought my specialness was enough to tackle these problems when actually faced with the challenges in front of me, I was like, faltered because I wasn't honest with myself and my own abilities. And so respecting the course is more about remaining present, engaged, and being really honest with myself with humility and going, here are the gaps between where I am now and what I need to be, how I need to be, how I need to show up to solve said problem, to tackle said challenge. And I wasn't thinking about any of that because I thought this was all just going to be a shoo-in.
You had gotten yourself so puffed up and you'd been puffed up by others. Ego was ahead, weren't paying attention, and then you didn't respect the course.
That was the first thing that hit my journal page, was I did not respect the course. And then the following question, thank goodness for men's work and my men's group, because I love this question. Where else does this show up in my life?
Nice. So tell me more.
Everywhere. Everywhere. When, especially at the time I had a business, I had employees, I had a lot of responsibility. And man, on average, like, what should a marketing budget be? Right? 10, 15% maybe. I was spending 60% of our earnings on marketing. Way too aggressive. Way too aggressive. And at the end of the month, it's like, where's the money? And then all the pressure to make up, bridge the gap there. And so there was just a perfect example right there. I was being way too frivolous, way too risky with my decision making, just like, oh, I'll make that back. I wasn't respecting the courses in like the business that I had at the time. Relationships across the board. Too many examples to list. But yeah, it was my performance was indicative. The result was indicative of many areas of life and many outcomes that were to come.
What's up, everyone? Brandon here, and I want to tell you, you, the busy professional,
the dad juggling multiple tasks and duties, about something that has transformed my mornings, and that is Magic Mind. Now imagine having energy all day for work, dad duties, and perhaps even some to spare in the evenings. Well, a couple weeks ago, I was hitting that afternoon crash hard. The 2 p.m. blues were the soundtrack to my life, and then I got a hold of Magic Mind. Now, this isn't just any supplement. It's been developed over 10 years by doctors and researchers with over 200 studies backing its ingredients. This tiny little powerhouse of a shot uses premium nootropics and adaptogens, and thanks to its advanced encapsulation technology, it absorbs 5 to 10 times faster than a pill. Now, since my wife and I have added Magic Mind to our routine, we're more focused, calm, and our energy sustains all day without the caffeine crash. It's safe, scientifically validated, and it helps me and my wife stay sharp and stress-free. So if you're ready to upgrade your day, head to magicmind.com and use the code MANKIND20. That's MANKIND20 at checkout to get up to 48% off. Now you can find those links in the show notes, but that's magicmind.com, and at checkout use the code MANKIND20. When you support our sponsors, you support our show, so I appreciate you as always, and trust me, you will thank me once you get a hold of this stuff.
Too many things to list, and this to me jumps right into a point of, so how do we teach ourselves to respect the course? And I think that one of the ways that you and I have been interacting and in relationship for quite a while, and actually getting the lists of things out there is one of the ways to build that respect for the course, right? Whatever it is that you're setting out on, whatever project that you're setting out on, whatever big opportunity that you have in front of you, respecting the course might look like making lists of, what is this obstacle going to look like? What are the possibilities that might happen here? What is the best allocation of resource? Whatever that looks like.
Mitigation strategies, contingency plans. But also I think, especially if, we're all at the helm of steering our own lives, and you may be at the helm of a company or an organization or a family, understanding that inherently in every leader, in every individual, there are blind spots. And if you had asked me in those moments, what were my blind spots? I said, none.
None, right.
Right. So not even the humility to acknowledge the fact that there may be blind spots to my approach. I mean, I was watching other competitors, cringe thinking about my attitude, like preparing their steps for the first step. And I'm like, why are they wasting their time? That's the steps at the beginning. There's always steps at the beginning. Like, why are they practicing like that? And then watching people prepare, like doing a 2-hand grab or a 2-step thing. And I'm like, I'm single stepping this thing, like 1 foot in each thing. And if you go to the article, which we'll have linked in the show notes, I put the YouTube video of me falling, and you can see why I should have 2-stepped it.
So, and there's well, that's interesting too, right? 1 step, 2 step, no step. So you assumed, right? I got this. You assumed I'm going to 1 step my way through this whole thing. Mind the gap. There's a call back to another episode of the podcast.
Yes.
Right. Or you can be the 2-stepper. That's maybe more deliberate. That's a little bit slower in process. That's going to slow down your time. Or you can be the no-stepper. And so here's a word of warning, right? This is my tendency. I will spend all the time planning, all the time laying it out, all the time doing contingency thinking, all the time, and then never take the first step. Never get up to the buzzer.
Maybe never having applied in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. So, there's something to be said and drawn from this experience to go, well, yeah, I had the boldness to go, oh yeah, this is me. Right. I mean, in my current role, with the current company and the contract I have, like when I read the description, I went into the interview going, this is me. But that was from a place of knowing. That was from a place of like true confidence, because I read the description. I qualify for this role. Back then, it was an assumption that I did because of the test, because of what's required in Ninja Warrior, like all that jazz. So it was very interesting to see that, okay, there are definitely benefits to just running headlong into things and not overthinking. But if you are looking to play the long game, or if you're looking to truly ensure success, you got to at some point choose the 2-step option. Take it a bit slower. I mean, that's how, since having, getting married and having a kid, we're 3-stepping it. We're being very intentional. We're taking it very slow because there's a lot more at stake.
Yeah. So there's an idea about gauging the risk also. Like you said, you knew with this current role, like I'm the guy, and I recognize that I've seen it in you. I see it in me. I see it in others, right? That there's a question mark about, okay, I know this is right. I know this is the right thing. I know I'm the guy, and holy shit, there's risk. It's not risk. A no-brainer. It's not a zero effort. It is like, this is going to stretch me, and goes back to one, right? Leave your ego at the door.
Yeah, absolutely. And to really frame where my head was at, to see how kind of perhaps delusional I was, in television, they have rules. You can't wear clothing with logos on it because there's
backwards.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, to that point. You can't wear things with logos because there's rights issues there. Right. Yeah, so if I have Nike on my chest, then Channel 9 does not have the rights to Nike's logo or brand. And so I couldn't wear my own brand because I'm going, if I'm going to be on TV in front of 1 million people, I'm going to wear my gym's logo. Well, not allowed. Well, and that also, what was challenging was I planned to do it in a Speedo and a cape because why not? Where am I going to put my branding, right? Not there. And so I end up using my mirror in my hotel room with a permanent marker, and I draw the Z from my logo zone onto my chest. And so during the interview before my run, the interviewer was going, all right, so I see the superhero costume. What does the S stand for? And I go, it's not an S, it's a Z. And the interviewer looks at the cameraman, concerned, looks back at me and goes, it's an S. And I look down and I go, oh, bugger. You think in that moment I might have gone, oh, maybe my plan isn't that thorough when I'm drawing things backwards on my chest. Which in the article you can see all the lovely images of that S splayed on my chest.
And that's there's also a don't go it alone thing, right? Because as soon as you had a second set of eyes,
if I had another competitor with me whom I had respect for at the time, I probably would have listened to what the others were doing to prepare, but I was thinking I didn't need to.
Lesson 4: surrender expectations and detach from potential outcomes.
Mm-hmm. So early days of my men's work journey had very little acuity in being able to remove my own self-worth from anything I put myself into.
Yeah.
At the time, the fuel for my existence was the validation of others. I did not know how to fill that myself. And so with my gym, with my clients, with my employees, with all that stuff, it was their success represented my self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the case with anything I did. Remember, I was doing Toastmasters at the time, and I was sweating from every speech going, this has to be TED Talk worthy. The pressure was so high. So I had manufactured the stakes to be higher than they needed to be because I felt like, much like leaving assignments to the last minute or cramming for a test the night before, which was my style, it made the stakes seem more important. It made them seem higher. In turn, made me feel like a worthy hero on my hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
Why prepare when I can just jump headlong and jump into it? Because who would watch the movie if it was smooth sailings? So subconsciously or consciously, I would make things harder than they needed to be because my self-worth was wrapped up in all of it. And so any other outcome other than hitting that final buzzer was not acceptable. And making that my only outcome meant that any other possible outcome was going to be a failure. But you look at any endeavor, right? Boysen, let me ask you, how many times have you set out to achieve a goal? It didn't meet your expectations, But in retrospect, you found out it was actually better an outcome than what you had originally wanted.
Yeah, totally. It's a daily experience. Yeah, in lots of little ways, and contributing to bigger ways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What if you had married your high school sweetheart?
Dude, I went through that. Biggest failure wasn't my high school sweetheart, but that I count that as my biggest learning opportunity in my life was the relationship that I went through in my 20s. Yeah.
Thankful I didn't marry mine.
Yeah.
Right. So whether it's God, universe, spirit, whoever, whatever higher power you may ascribe to, we call it Gus in our household, there are other plans, perhaps. There are other outcomes that are better. And I tell you what, like I said in the beginning, it was better that I failed the way I failed because of the lessons that I could draw from it than if I was a middle tier performer. Even if I crushed it the way I thought I was going to. In fact, thank goodness I didn't win the bloody thing. Thank goodness, because who knows where my head, my ego, this disillusion would have taken me.
Right. Different from where you are now. Yeah.
Bingo. So for surrounding your expectations, I think the big thing is being more adaptable and resilient to the idea that things can go different ways than I initially want or expect or hope they're going to happen gives me a sense of when things do go awry, when things do not go the way I want them to, this attitude and this little mantra that has become so powerful for me, and you've heard me say it a bunch of times, is now this. I'm going to learn something from this.
So this kind of goes into your last, segues into your last, which is enjoy the journey, have fun and enjoy the journey. So yeah, I've let go of the expectations and the outcome and knowing what it's going to be like and all of that. And now what do I do?
So after I hit the water and I come out and I'm sitting on the edge of the pool and the interviewer comes over and goes, "Mate, we had such higher expectations for you. What happened?" And I was like, I can't remember what I said. I think it was something like, "Oh yeah, I forgot my legs were short," or something. And then I ran off to my tent. What does this mean? And I run to my tent and I dry off and I feel sorry for myself for a second. And I'm writing in my journal like, "Oh, what does this mean for my life?" And I returned back. This is like 2 a.m, by the way. I returned back to the waiting room. And there's only a few, I was like third on the night. There's 50 of us. And it takes a long time to run these people through. So probably at that point, maybe only 3 or 4 competitors were left. And there were a lot of wet people. A lot of wet people in the room. Mascara running, damp clothes, and only a small handful of people that were dry. In fact, out of the 50, only 8 made it through. And so as I was seeing these people, many of them crying, which I could resonate with, I certainly didn't judge them. And I was chatting to them. Some of these people were devastated, far more than I felt like I was. And nothing felt better than making them feel better by telling them how I did.
Oh, wow.
It's like everyone was like, "Oh, really?
You're that guy?"
Really? Wait, what? Second step? And so bringing levity to that moment was really cool. Getting to celebrate with those who made it through. Many of them, the unassuming ones that I had initially judged, thinking like, "Oh God, how are they going to do?" Like that was really humbling as well. So even in failure, there are victories worth celebrating. There are victories within the failure that you can pull out. And if I had just allowed myself only that one outcome, even in defeat, if I was still sitting in that place of I didn't achieve this thing, I would have been robbed of all those joyful moments that followed, which included not just friendships that have lasted a lifetime, but in season 2, getting invited back to test the course. So I was a course tester. So for 5 days at 50 Australian dollars an hour, which is not a bad little pot there, I got to test all these pieces of equipment and all these runs on the course that I never got a chance to try.
Wow.
And I remember,
didn't know that part of the story.
Yeah, it was awesome. I mean, the booking agent was like, "Hey, Brandon, do you want a chance to actually see what the course feels like?" And that was awesome. So, like, how many people get a chance to just play on things all day? I mean, I couldn't make a fist at the end of each day because your forearms are just like smoked up and everything. And I took some big hits, but hanging out with these people where it's like they adjust it because some things are too easy. The engineers have to move them further away and such. And that was just so much joy. It came from that experience. So I'm thankful it went the way it did. Like I said from the beginning, I have possibly one of the best fun facts I can pull out at any time when meeting a new group of people. And these lessons truly have stuck with me for the most part ever since. And it's 8 years later.
8 years later. Sometimes the win is not the win you thought you were going to get.
100%. Absolutely. I was determined I was going to marry my last partner, live in Utah for the rest of my life. Thank God I didn't. Right. Thank God that breakup was as ugly and painful as it was, because it forced me to do the work I needed to do to become the person that was going to attract my wife. So anytime your plan doesn't go to plan, get curious. What does this mean? What's going to come from this? More likely than not, I dare say, if you have the necessary attitude and perhaps some humility in the moment to go, now this.
Now this. Brandon Clift, thank you, my brother. Thanks for sharing. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, it's fun digging this out of the archives and yeah, sometimes I forget these lessons too and need a reminder. So this is fun to dig this back up, and I'm excited for all of you to listen to it, and would love to hear your thoughts out there. You know, what has been something that you were certain was the outcome that you had to have or needed to have or were so attached to, and something different happened that was in turn better? Would love to hear it.
So cool. Let's put pen to paper on that and say, hey, if you want to send us a story about your biggest failure and what came out of that biggest failure, maybe we'll share some of those on the show. I think that would be a really fun thing.
It would be.
Today's failure of the week and the good thing that came out of it.
Yeah. What's that Rob Dyrdek? Ridiculousness. Like, we just have like life stories of crashing and burning and the beautiful things that come from it. Well, and of course, to those listeners out there, we are willing and open to answering your questions. Send them in. I know someone messaged the other day and said, how do you stop being petty? And then that was it. And I was like, oh, I need a little bit more information to run off that. But so if you are going to send some questions in, give us some context.
Give us a little context.
Give us a little context, because I would love to, we would love to chop it up. I mean, we have been fortunate to be front row to a lot of incredible experts. We ourselves have got 30 years of men's work experience between us. So throw them at us. Let's see what we can do. We're not medical professionals, nor are we psychologists. So take anything we say with a grain of salt. Most of our experience is anecdotal. But yeah, I believe between us, we could have a good stab at some of those questions that you all have.
There you go. Thanks, Brandon. Thanks, listeners. See you next time.
Lots of love. See you next week. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your host, Boysen Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. That is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.
Hey, it's Boysen here with the Mankind Podcast. We are closing in on 100 5-star reviews of this podcast, and we have a goal. Brandon and I want to get to 250 5-star reviews. So help us out, will you? Please go to the Mankind Podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. Thank you. Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.